BlackRock is a good example of somebody you can name who behind the scenes is pulling the strings.
This is a company most people have never heard of, and this company quite literally owns the world. Most US banks are controlled by BlackRock. BlackRock owns all the major pharmaceutical companies. BlackRock owns most of the mainstream media, and BlackRock oversees roughly 10% of all stocks traded worldwide. And this company is now taking over governments. All of this has allowed BlackRock to amass $10 trillion in assets. Yes, trillion. BlackRock is worth half of America's total
Try to conceptualize $20 trillion.
GDP. It's so crazy that the US and Chinese government now rely on BlackRock to escape recessions, with BlackRock's founder and CEO now sitting on the boards of the influential Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum.
Globalist.
In the words of Henry Kissinger, whoever controls the money controls the world, and no other company in history has had this much global influence. And what's even crazier is that BlackRock did this in just 34 years. But you want to know the best part? You've probably never heard of them for a reason which will become clearer later on, because after you watch this video, you will soon understand the real-world consequences of BlackRock's vast control.
Full-scale invasion, the likes of which we haven't seen since World War II, of Russia into Ukraine.
And those high gas prices mean the cost of everything that needs to be transported is on the rise.
So then how could BlackRock gain so much influence over the world? How could BlackRock go from being just a boring investment firm to the most powerful company that has ever existed? Well, to start, we have to delve into the past.
Basically blackmail. So they had this thing where they have like woke points where they'll judge corporations and if they should invest in the corporation based on how woke they are. So you notice every time it's Pride Month, every time it's some woke season, if there's a women's pride parade or it's election coming around, you'll see a bunch of propaganda. You know when you walk around in Target and then you see a bunch of rainbows right in the front of the store for no reason? They do that so as a signal to the investors and to the hedge funds like BlackRock who can pretty much create companies because they're so wealthy. When you have trillions of dollars, you can influence the whole world. So they expose the fact that they have a graph that shows how woke you are because that will give them a signal like, oh, okay, we should invest in you because you're woke. You did the right thing. It's pretty much a larger scale difference. You know when you see people with gender pronouns in their bio or the gay pride flag or Ukraine flag, it's like a signal to other bots. I'm one of the good ones. Corporations do the same thing with rainbow flip-flops in the front of Target.
How Larry Fink made BlackRock. Larry was born into a wealthy Los Angeles family in 1952, and from the start, he was always hungry for power, with his early years spent pursuing a career in politics, where he would gain a BA in political science from UCLA. However, he soon enough realized that politics isn't where the real power is, money is. Following this, he changed his focus early on to go into banking and real estate. And while at college, Fink was immersing himself in the world of the rich and powerful, having been a full-time member of the secretive Kappa Beta Phi, a group that's members included Michael Bloomberg and the Goldman Sachs chairmen. Fink took full advantage of these connections and started a career in the mortgage bond department at First Boston, a boring New York-based investment bank. This was where Larry would make his mark on the financial world, because over his time at First Boston, Fink became one of the highest earning employees, generating over $1 billion. He was unstoppable and it seemed like he was going to be crowned CEO. Larry became an...
Wow, I just had to, and I'm not trying to promote anti-Semitic theories, obviously, but it's pretty funny. I just searched, is Larry Fink Jewish? He grew up in one of 3 children in a Jewish family in Van Nuys, California. Why does it... Well, Fink is a very, yeah, I have no opinion on that.
An expert in these little understood investments during his time. However, this success didn't come without a price. He wasn't going to make this money for someone other than him, and so he began creating a ticking time bomb, and only he knew how to defuse it. So in 1986, his risky practices and ambition caught up to him. After a few too many risky trades, Larry made a huge blunder. He lost $100 million of this bank's money in just the space of months. All the goodwill and reputation he had gained was crumbling into dust, leading to him being banished from First Boston. It seemed like world domination was just a silly fantasy, that he would never make it to the top. However, Fink wasn't giving up his power this easily. Instead, he would use this disaster to his advantage, vowing to make risk management and avoidance his main focus from now on. And so after becoming unemployed at age 36, Fink would team up with some of his old connections from Kappa Beta Phi, and in 1988, BlackRock was formed. In no time at all, Larry was making bank. In just 5 years, BlackRock went from being worth $5 million to over $8 billion. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. During this time, a power struggle would emerge between who would control BlackRock's future, because Fink wanted—
Chat, shut the fuck up with that. There's moderation tools. Like, stop doing that. Stop doing that. All right, let me go. I have to do it now. I can't let people. I'll just mute you for this live stream, people saying shit like that. If you're saying anti-Semitic shit, John Boda, thanks for the 5. Not trying to sound like a tinfoil head, but certain locations in the US won't let you access BitChute and Rumble. The ISPs are blocking clients from getting the HTTP request to the site. Get a VPN. Damn. I didn't know that. But finally, yeah, Rumble's bugging right now. It's okay.
A bigger piece of the pie. He didn't want to share his plans for world domination. So in 1995, he would pressure one of the co-founders, Schwartzman, to sell their stake in BlackRock for $250 million. A stake that would now be worth over $12 billion alone. But after these power games, Larry Fink's path to world domination was unstoppable. Larry Fink became more and more powerful over the next decade. But this still wasn't enough for his ambition. Now earlier on, I mentioned a ticking time bomb that Fink helped create in his early days at First Boston. Well, this time bomb was now ready to explode. And in 2008, the worst financial crash since the Great Depression struck the world.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it. The movement in oil prices.
Chat, and see, don't say that I'm hiding the truth. Here's the problem. No matter if you're right or not, thanks for the 10, Chris Kibb. SNEAKO, I really like to hear you talk with other people I know about the podcast idea, but do you got anyone else lined up that you could talk to? Of course, you don't have a lot planned for the stream. I'm not trying to hide the truth, but there's a couple things. One, if you're right about the anti-Semitic shit you're saying, then what is that going to change? These guys have trillions of dollars, have ultimate power. You yelling in all caps saying a bunch of racial slurs and shit like this, saying Hitler and shit like that, what the fuck does that do? What are we going to do about it? We're just here on Rumble. We're chilling out on late night. Even if you're right, it doesn't change anything. The rest of society will shun you. You're going to make this stream look bad. You are going to put a bad stain on Rumble, the only free speech website left. There's a point where you need to suppress what the fuck. You can't just come in here and just say a bunch of fucking garbage. Fuck the, blah, blah, blah. Bro, get some friends. You are not helping anything. Even if you are right. And I'm not saying that you are. What do you think you're changing? So if you are right, act accordingly. Make as much money as possible. Start preparing. Don't put your money in the wrong places. And also be careful of what you're saying. Because if you are anti-Semitic, which it seems like there's a lot of those people in the chat, if you are like that, you should see what happened to Ye, what happened to Kyrie, what happened to me, what happened to Fuentes, and then act accordingly. Do you want to be played in the Senate? Do you want to get disappeared? Ye had some random guy threaten to take away his children, say that they were going to drug him up, put out all this information saying that they were going to make him look crazy. He said that get ready say bye to play dates with your kids. So you see what I'm saying? Like, it does not help anything. There's straight up like fucking schizos in this chat. You have a point, but you made a point of him being Jewish, so you set the spark. Well, I was just looking it up. We can make observations without also saying anti-Semitic shit. So here's the difference between saying something anti-Semitic and making an accurate observation. When you look at the people behind the scenes, like people who control BlackRock, people who control the banks, people who control all the money, Hollywood, everything like that, you can either say a bunch of fucking garbage or just understand that they have connections and power. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Just act accordingly. This is a system, how they run this. They've banded together after the Holocaust, and now they have ultimate power and they have ultimate control. And now they can say things like, yeah, if you start speaking up, we're going to drug you and call you crazy. So shut up. They have a monopoly on power that's admirable after what happened in World War II. So other races and other groups, other communities can emulate that. We are not going to change that by spamming this shit in the chat. By saying the garbage that I have to ban you for, because I don't want to get drugged up. I want to keep my bank account. I want to go into I don't want to go into no-fly list. I like Delta. You know what I'm saying? I like those little snack boxes. I want to watch a movie on the plane. Yes, of course I encourage free speech, but also we can't speak freely If they drug you up, call you crazy, take your family, and refuse you from traveling. You see what I'm saying? Pick your battles, basically.
So fast.
The most serious recession in decades. And that means life, as most Americans know it, is about to change.
And the best part is, this was all under Larry's control. Larry Fink's mortgage-backed securities had been the fuse all along. And because Larry Fink knew the 2008 crash would happen, BlackRock's focus on asset management sealed them from the crisis. In fact, this disaster was an opportunity for Larry Fink, because Larry was the only man on Wall Street who could fix this crisis. And so with Larry's personal connections with the Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, BlackRock secured an uncontested contract to manage the assets of multiple banks that crumbled during the crisis, exploiting this disaster to become the most powerful man on Wall Street. But still, this was only Wall Street. This still wasn't close to world domination. So how could Larry Fink control governments and the world economy? Well, BlackRock made another breakthrough by offering ETFs. Now, this might sound quite technical, but ETFs are a type of investment fund that puts money into all the companies in a certain industry. And these new investment funds proved wildly popular because of the stability and solid returns. And unsurprisingly, BlackRock became the largest player in this new market, reaching the top of its industry, sucking up money from everywhere using its new money management platform. From the biggest banks to the smallest retirement funds, BlackRock had a hand in it all. BlackRock was starting to control everything. They bought stakes in pretty much every major corporation on the stock market. I mean, if you look into who owns pretty much any major company, you're almost guaranteed to find BlackRock's name. Larry could also see the power technology would have in the future economy, which is why BlackRock poured masses of wealth to build a supercomputer that analyzes what investments will make money. This program, named Aladdin, would go on to manage over $20 trillion worth of assets for BlackRock. For context, $20 trillion is more than the entire United States' GDP. BlackRock would then use this money and its assets to further exert their control over the economy, and now they are inextricably tied to governments.
This is what, when you talk about the Illuminati, this is exactly what it is. When you have more power than the government, it's basically, it all comes down to money, which is something I think everybody should inherently know, is that they don't have your best interest in mind. Power and money run the world. So whoever has the most money controls everything. This is an organization, this is a hedge fund that controls everything. These are the people that Kanye and Kyrie are fighting right now, and that they've had to apologize and they lost everything talking about.
And like 2008, the Federal Reserve hired BlackRock to manage their investments to protect them from coronavirus-led recessions. And BlackRock has used this dependence to grow.
Like, do you think these people got masked up? Do you think the people that run BlackRock got vaccinated? Do you think they quarantined? Do you think they social distance? Or did they fly around and do whatever the fuck they wanted to do while we ran around yelling at each other in a grocery store?
Grow their empire even further, allowing Larry Fink to be a billionaire oligarch that holds unprecedented power over not just the economy, but the entire world. He controls trends, culture, foreign policy, and the banks. He has world leaders at his beck and call, with BlackRock overseeing assets worth 10% of the world's global economy. BlackRock now owns stakes in every industry, from media companies, banks, oil companies, and weapon manufacturers. And in recent years, the consequences are becoming dire as Larry Fink begins to exert his control over the world. But before we continue, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Masterworks. Masterworks lets you diversify with an asset class millionaires and billionaires use. You can then hold on to it until it's sold at a diverse description below. For its control of the media. Together with Vanguard, an investment company they also partly own, BlackRock now controls 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 13% of Comcast.
They control the media.
Who themselves own NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, and Sky, and they
on both sides, the right and the left,
even own 12% of Disney. This is very important because it means that for any of these companies to
also don't say anything, but what was Walt Disney?
Decide on company policy, they must now also consult with BlackRock before doing so. And it's just the same with big tech. BlackRock is now the biggest institutional investor in Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and so many more. I mean, the list of their investments in companies is just endless. And by extending its reach in such a dramatic way, BlackRock now has control over more than 90% of the media, which might also be why you've never heard of them. Because controlling the media is a very important step for BlackRock to take over the world. If everyone knew the consequences of BlackRock owning over 9.5 $1.5 trillion in assets, some questions might start to be raised. And you see, BlackRock's control isn't just extending through information in the media, but also through the entire world's economic and political data. And as I mentioned before, this is all done through Aladdin, where Aladdin accurately predicts the outcome of every single investment. But the question is, where does Aladdin get—
Oh, wait. Walt Disney was, actually, they called him an anti-Semite. I'm wrong. You see what I'm saying? Hey, they don't control everything.
This information
Relax.
from? Well, that's where things become very jarring. You see, because of BlackRock's ownership of banks, insurance companies, social media giants, and even pension funds, Aladdin now possesses huge amounts of personal data on everyone who has ever knowingly or unknowingly given BlackRock money. And with such a powerful tool under their arsenal, everyone now wants a piece of the pie. And by controlling this much data, BlackRock now controls governments, because BlackRock can use this data to sway companies and even government decisions. For example, BlackRock successfully lobbied to get a contract to manage the EU's regulation of banks. However, this backroom deal is now being investigated, as BlackRock themselves own the banks they should be regulating. And this is just one of the many examples of these sorts of actions. A 2016 study in the Journal of Finance—
Someone in the chat said something that's pretty accurate. SNEAKO, it is you causing the anti-Semitic retards to spam Jews control the world, but Jewish people aren't all seeking power. Of course, we know that. We know that. You're right. You're right. This is the problem. I'm seeing it with a lot of the people in the chat right now. They're realizing that behind the scenes, a lot of people that control the most money are Jewish, but it's not Jewish people as a whole. It's nothing wrong with the religion of Judaism at all. It's a certain level of wealth and control that they delegate to each other. And that happens to be a lot of Jewish people. It's not the Jewish religion. That's the misconception that a lot of people have when they start to realize the truth.
documented that investment companies like BlackRock show, quote, widespread behind-the-scenes intervention in the companies that they own stakes in. And this problem only gets worse as BlackRock owns stakes in nearly all major publicly traded companies. And now with our current recession, BlackRock is buying as much homes and real estate as possible, causing regular house prices to skyrocket. BlackRock profits when a society doesn't own their homes but rents, because BlackRock can squeeze even more money out of the economy through mortgaging off these artificially inflated homes. But this whole situation becomes even more sinister when you realize BlackRock's power is now being compromised by other actors. For example, in August 2020, BlackRock became the first foreign company to be allowed access into China's mutual fund industry. This means that BlackRock can now invest and own parts of Chinese companies. God only knows what BlackRock promised Xi Jinping if they're allowed in, but by being allowed in, BlackRock now works with companies that are blacklisted by the US. One example is BlackRock's investment in a CCP-owned company called Hikvision. Hikvision makes security and communications technology for both civilian and military use by the Chinese government, and they're also known for their wide-scale human rights abuses.
How do you think your facial recognition technology will change China?
Everything happened in the public can be record.
Now, this money being invested into China isn't just BlackRock's own money. Most of this money comes from the pension funds and bank accounts that ordinary people pay into BlackRock inadvertently. Through BlackRock controlling banks, people have no choice about whether they give BlackRock and the CCP this money. That's if they even know about BlackRock. This recent trend of BlackRock funding authoritarian regimes can only mean bad things for Western democracy, because this empowers regimes like China and Russia. It gives credence to dystopian regimes, and this trend is now promoting others to do the same. I mean, BlackRock recently recommended that their investors triple their investments in China. This would place billions more into a dystopian regime at the expense of the West. And the worst part is that China sees the companies that operate within it as simply extensions of the one-party state. They own these companies, and in return, the companies act out the CCP's will, which is a worrying fact when you consider that BlackRock owns the entire world's data. TikTok's data harvesting is nothing compared to BlackRock's. BlackRock knows the entire world's bank details, their preferences, tastes. It sets social trends. It oversees entire countries. So any increase in Chinese investments will see not just BlackRock's influence grow, but also China's influence grow in BlackRock. Since August of 2020, when BlackRock were first allowed into the Chinese economy, they have only poured more and more money into these Chinese companies. Clearly, Aladdin the supercomputer sees this as a profitable move, but what it might not see is the destruction of Western values. It might not see how the CCP could influence the world economy and global politics even more than—
Basically, they use social media to brainwash us and destroy traditional values and spread feminism and a bunch of LGBT and destroy the family from the inside out. That's why everybody believes in the same gender fluidity nonsense. It's been spread through social media. That's why like 2% of American teenage girls think that they're trans because of the garbage that is pushed online. And where they get this from TikTok and Instagram, who's pushing this garbage on TikTok and Instagram? The CCP.
it already is. It might not see that BlackRock's huge investments will be the catalyst towards this change. I mean, who knows how much more BlackRock will invest in China? But if their growth over the past year is a sign of anything, China will inevitably become a much bigger part of BlackRock's future. And make no mistake, this will have dire consequences. But the cherry on top of all of this is that BlackRock is the main force behind the sheepish woke lecturing that tells you how guilty you should feel. In 2018, around the dawn of the new generation of political correctness, Larry wrote a letter telling all the companies under his thumb to, quote, contribute to society or risk losing our support, adding that
Bomboka! Chat, can you stop saying the fucking Bomboka? You know what I'm talking about. Stop saying that. It's Black Rock. I know what it sounds like. It's Black Rock. Okay, put some respect.
Quote, society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose. Which is a very interesting statement coming from a company that is quite literally funding the persecution of Uyghur Muslims and the imprisonment of the Chinese population. A company that is funding a dystopic nuclear regime that is quite literally threatening the very fabric of Western civilization. And so with BlackRock's push for, quote, social purposes, companies now have an ESG score, or in other words, sustainable investing scores, where you have a rating system based on your
the woke rating.
These political and social facades. So for example, doing a woke ad for a company like Nike or silencing any controversial political views on social media will help you get the high ESG score.
They will, on their investor relations page, they'll show you their ESG score.
The woke rating.
ESG stands for environmental, social, corporate governance. And this is where the woke culture comes from. So they've created...
This is the craziest part to me.
This kind of phony baloney rating system that says, well, if you, I'm exaggerating, but if you mention that you are, have a green agenda and you believe in carbon credits and you might trade some credits somewhere, then you get a higher score and therefore you're more investable. And it's very...
So they don't give a fuck about woke culture. They just know that the more woke points you have, the more susceptible this corporation is to brainwashing the population. The better they are to invest in because they have more mindless consumers involved in this pride, LGBT, trans, woke, pride, BLM garbage. They don't give a fuck. They're not Black Lives Matter. Do you think any of these BlackRock billionaires, trillionaires are at a Black Lives Matter rally? You think they care about George Floyd? They just know that any company who's pushing that narrative is good to invest in because they're keeping everybody controlled with woke nonsense.
Very interesting to see how big investors like insurance company, institutional investors, they are steering away from anything that does not have the right ESG rating.
And if the past tells us anything, it seems like BlackRock is only destined to control more and more of our daily lives. Through Larry Fink's close ties with government leaders around the world, with his huge influence over the World Economic Forum, and his position on the boards of the Council on Foreign Relations, BlackRock is only destined to metastasize. So perhaps BlackRock defines the new era of our globalized world, where ruthless, predatory corporations amass more power than countries, where our politics and society isn't dictated by votes, it's dictated by investment boards controlled by BlackRock, delivering us a more generic, mindless, vapid, and vicious culture. Perhaps BlackRock is just a...
They know that woke culture promotes degeneracy.
A monument.
They know that. That's what's destroying America. And that's why I'm saying, like, even some guy as extreme as Nick, for example, like anybody on the really far right could be the last chance of saving the country because any single... all the liberal cities right now, type of one if you know what I'm talking about. If you're in LA, I talked to people from LA, they said, like, you can't even wear a watch in LA anymore. You can't even drive in a nice car because you're going to get robbed. You're going to get robbed. If you look at all the crime, bro, the videos of crime that's happening in LA, it's just, it looks like The Purge. It's just complete degeneracy. There's absolutely no morals. I went there recently. It's just a bunch of NPCs walking around. Liberal-run cities are done. We need to have some sort of traditional values. We need to have a society run by God, or else everything falls apart. LA is the perfect example of that. Portland, Oregon, everything that happened in the past 2 years is a perfect example of that. They have used that to destroy, to keep people down, and it's going to get worse. So what we need to do is start preparing and make as much money as possible. You know what I'm talking about. If anybody's been to LA, you got to get the fuck out. Anybody in LA, you know it's trash. The amount of, I was just there, the amount of porn stars, you're not going to find any girl who's 20 without 40 bodies. If her age is, she has double the body count as her age in LA. Absolutely no morals, no guidance, and that's when crime starts happening. That's when people burn down the city. And it's just degenerate, and everyone's on drugs. Degenerate.
To a world divided between too big to fail companies and powerless, moneyless, and joyless citizens, where companies like BlackRock buy up all our houses, inflating our currencies and profit from our conflicts and turmoil. That's why you can't buy a house. That's why we're more divided than ever. That's why too big to fail companies are defining life in the 2020s. Because we no longer live under free market capitalism, we live under a system for socialism for the rich.
Get rich now. Get rich now. It's going to get worse. Chet, do you think that America still stands a chance? Or I have a lot of Europeans in this stream. I am preparing to just leave. I would like to have one foot in here. My family's here, you know, saying I got the friends. But I don't see a positive future. Not with shit like this. Not with that inflation. She 1 year old with 2 bodies. Exactly. You're in the womb and she's already on Tinder. Thank you, 5, John Boner. Instead of using the J word, we have to use Freemasons. Is that objectively more accurate? Even if there's a Talmudic influence in these cult groups, we are all still seeking truth through funny. Yo, you're talking a lot about Talmud and J word and Freemasons for a guy with the name John Boner. Okay, next.
That's it.
Your job?